Ambassador Zixthara had waited 3 cycles for this moment. Her scaled fingers trembled as she adjusted her translation collar, watching the sterile white corridor stretch endlessly before her. The Galactic Council had briefed her extensively on humanity's peculiarities, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer paranoia surrounding their species. The meeting chamber aboard the neutral station Harmony felt oppressive despite its generous dimensions. Every surface was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting her reptilian features back at her from dozens of angles. She had undergone 6 months of psychological preparation, 3 separate security clearances, and signed documentation that would make her personally liable for any civilizational disruption that might result from this encounter. "You understand the gravity of this situation?" The voice belonged to Counselor Vex, a towering crystalline being whose form shimmered with nervous energy. The ancient diplomat had overseen first contact protocols for over 2 centuries, had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of galactic powers, yet his usual composure was nowhere to be found. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and we could lose another sector. Zixthara nodded, her throat sacs inflating slightly with anxiety. Everyone knew the stories. The Kethmori had made contact with humans 50 years ago, enthusiastic, friendly contact. They had welcomed human advisors with open arms, eager to learn from the strange bipedal creatures who had somehow bootstrapped themselves from a single planet to a galactic presence in less than 3 centuries. Within a decade, their entire military doctrine had been revolutionized. Their warriors, once content with traditional honor duels and defensive postures, had become something else entirely. They now served as humanity's most trusted allies, but the Kethmori of old, contemplative, pacifistic, focused on inner harmony, had effectively ceased to exist. The peaceful Draknari had hosted a human cultural exchange program, thinking themselves too gentle and philosophical to be changed by outside influence. Now they were the most feared warriors in 3 spiral arms, their meditation techniques somehow twisted into something that made their soldiers nearly unstoppable in combat. They claimed they were still the same species, still devoted to peace, but their definition of peace now involved the complete elimination of any potential threat to their tranquil existence. "The test," she whispered, her voice barely registering on the translation matrix. "What exactly?" "You'll know when you face it," Vex interrupted, his crystalline fingers chiming against each other with agitation. "Every species faces something different." The Gornathi were asked to solve a simple puzzle, something about resource allocation that their children could have answered. The Villani had to demonstrate their art, but the humans seemed more interested in why they created beauty than how they achieved it. The Zephyrians were given a mathematical problem that turned out to be a philosophical question in disguise. The counselor's form shifted through several spectrum bands, a sure sign of deep distress among his people. "But the test itself isn't what matters, it's what they're really measuring. We've had researchers studying the pattern for decades, trying to understand the selection criteria." The ambassador felt her secondary heart skip a beat. "And what's that?" Counselor Vex's crystalline form dimmed to barely visible levels, a whisper of light in the shadows. "Whether you're worthy of their influence." The word hung in the recycled air like a toxin. Influence. Not technology, not alliance, not trade agreements. Influence. The ability to change the fundamental nature of a civilization simply by existing near it. Humans didn't conquer worlds, they transformed them. They didn't impose their will through force, they made other species want to become more like them. "What if I fail?" Zixthara asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Then the Korthani Republic maintains its current status. Minimal contact, restricted trade, diplomatic relations conducted through intermediaries." Vex paused, his light pulsing slowly. "But if you pass, everything changes. Your people will have access to human knowledge, human perspective, human ways of seeing the universe. Within a generation, you may not recognize your own species." The weight of responsibility settled on Zixthara's shoulders like a physical force. She wasn't just representing her government or even her planet. She was potentially deciding the fate of her entire species' future evolution. "Why do they do this?" she asked. "Why not simply refuse contact entirely if the risks are so great?" Vex's form brightened slightly. Because the species that pass their test don't just survive, they thrive beyond anything they could have imagined. The Gornathi have solved the energy crisis that plagued them for millennia. The Kethmori have expanded across 17 systems and haven't lost a single soldier to combat in 30 years. The Draknari have achieved a peace so profound that conflict is literally unthinkable within their territory. And the species that fail? Continue as they were. No better but no worse. Humanity doesn't punish failure, they simply withdraw. Politely, respectfully, but completely. The corridor ahead seemed to stretch into infinity. Somewhere beyond those walls waited a human, probably unaware of the cosmic significance of their casual conversation. They would smile, perhaps offer refreshments, ask simple questions about Korthani culture. And in that seemingly innocent exchange, the future of an entire civilization would be decided. "I'm ready," Sixthra said. Though she had never felt less prepared for anything in her long diplomatic career, Counselor Vex's form pulsed once in what she recognized as encouragement. "Remember, they're not testing your intelligence or your capabilities. They're testing something far more fundamental. Something that determines whether contact with humanity will elevate your species or destroy it." The doors ahead began to iris open, revealing glimpses of the chamber beyond. Somewhere in there, a human was waiting. The test was about to begin. Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked nothing like a galactic threat. She sat cross-legged in the observation lounge, wearing a faded band t-shirt that proclaimed AC/DC World Tour 2387, and jeans with holes in the knees that appeared to be naturally worn rather than fashionably distressed. She was casually munching on what appeared to be colored sugar crystals while reading from a primitive paper book. An actual book made from processed plant matter, bound with adhesive and thread. Zixthara paused in the doorway, her diplomatic training warring with genuine bewilderment. She had studied human physiology extensively, reviewed countless behavioral analyses, and memorized every known cultural quirk of their species. But seeing one in person was still jarring in ways she hadn't anticipated. They were so small. Elena couldn't have been more than 1.7 meters tall, with the kind of delicate bone structure that spoke of a species evolved in gentle gravity. Her skin was a warm brown that seemed to glow under the chamber's artificial lighting, unmarked by the scars or ritual modifications that indicated status in most civilizations. No natural weapons were visible, no claws, no fangs, no venomous spines. No protective carapace armored her vulnerable organs. Her eyes were soft brown, lacking the reflective membranes that would grant enhanced vision or the compound structures that would provide superior threat detection. She looked, Zixthara thought with growing confusion, utterly defenseless. How had such creatures become the most restricted species in known space? How had these fragile bipeds managed to transform every civilization they encountered? The Korthani military assessments had concluded that a single Korthani warrior could easily overpower 3 humans in physical combat. Yet here she was, approaching this meeting with more trepidation than she had felt before negotiating ceasefires with the war clans of Zirian Prime. "Ambassador Zixthara, I presume?" Elena looked up with a warm smile, marking her place in the book with her finger. The gesture was so casual, so trusting. She had turned her back on a potential threat to save her place in recreational reading. "Welcome aboard the Harmony. I'm Dr. Rodriguez, but please, call me Elena." The ease in her voice was deeply unsettling. Every other species Zixthara had encountered approached first contact with some degree of ceremony. Ritual greetings, formal protocols, careful diplomatic choreography designed to minimize the risk of cultural offense. The Draknari spent entire days in purification ceremonies before meeting outsiders. The Gornathi required 17 different forms of identification and proof of peaceful intent. Humans apparently just talk to you. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Zixthara began, falling back on the formal diplomatic language she had rehearsed for weeks. "The Korthani Republic has long hoped to establish meaningful relations with your species, and we are honored that you would consider. Of course, I love meeting new people. New sapients." Elena laughed at her own correction, a sound like musical chimes that somehow conveyed both embarrassment and delight. "Sorry, old habit. We're still getting used to the whole galactic community thing. Would you like some Skittles? They're basically crystallized fruit flavoring. Before Zixthara could formulate a response, Elena was already pouring the colorful spheres into her palm with the unhesitating generosity of someone sharing with an old friend. The casual gesture made the ambassador's head spin. In galactic politics, every offering was carefully calculated, every gift weighed against future obligations and potential insults. Treaties had been broken over the improper presentation of ceremonial foods. This human was offering sustenance to a complete stranger simply because she could. I must warn you, Zixthara said carefully, her diplomatic training finally catching up with her surprise. My species' dietary requirements are quite different from yours. What is harmless to humans might be. Oh, these won't hurt you. Actually, they're completely inert to most non-Earth biochemistry. Humans just happen to have really weird taste receptors. Elena grinned, and Zixthara noticed that her teeth were small and flat, clearly evolved for processing plant matter rather than tearing flesh. One of our many evolutionary quirks. We basically developed the ability to find pleasure in things that would be toxic or meaningless to most other species. The test. This had to be part of it. Everything about this interaction was too casual, too coincidental. The food offering, the casual discussion of human biology, the complete lack of diplomatic protocol. It was all deliberate, all designed to evaluate her response. Zixthara accepted the small spheres, noting their perfect uniformity and artificial coloration. She placed one in her mouth experimentally. It dissolved instantly on her tongue, leaving behind a burst of synthetic sweetness unlike anything in traditional Korthani cuisine. Intense, almost overwhelming, but strangely appealing. Fascinating, she said truthfully, analyzing the flavor profile. The intensity is remarkable. It triggers pleasure responses even in biochemistry it wasn't designed for. Right? We basically bred our taste buds to crave things that would kill most other species. Sugar, caffeine, capsaicin, ethanol, we turned evolutionary toxins into recreational substances. Elena's eyes sparkled with what the ambassador was beginning to recognize as distinctly human mischief. We're kind of infamous for finding ways to enjoy things that shouldn't be enjoyable. But enough about our weird dietary habits. Tell me about your people. What's Korth Prime like? I've read the basic cultural briefings, but those never really capture what it's actually like to live somewhere. For the next hour, Elena asked questions with the relentless curiosity of a hatchling and the perceptive insight of a master diplomat. She wanted to know everything about Korthani culture, not just the surface details that filled most interspecies databases, but the intimate realities of daily life. How did their photosynthetic metabolism affect their sleep cycles? What did their cities look like when designed for beings who could derive energy from sunlight? How had their dual star system influenced their philosophy and religion? Zixthara found herself relaxing despite her training, drawn into conversations she hadn't expected to enjoy. Elena's questions weren't the probing inquiries of someone seeking advantage or the sterile academic queries of a xenobiologist. They carried genuine fascination, the kind of interest that made you want to share stories about your grandmother's cooking or the way morning light painted the crystal spires of the capital. Your mating dances sound incredible, Elena said, leaning forward with bright eyes after Zixthara described the elaborate courtship rituals that could last for entire seasons. The coordination between multiple partners, the way you synchronize with solar cycles, it's like performance art that encompasses your entire biology. Do you still practice the traditional forms? Or have they evolved with modern society? Many young Korthani prefer abbreviated versions, Zixthara admitted, surprised by how easy it was to discuss what was typically considered private cultural information. The full traditional dances require 3 full seasons of preparation and coordination between extended family groups. In our modern economy, few can afford such time investments. Elena nodded thoughtfully, making notes on a simple paper pad, another anachronism that somehow made the conversation feel more intimate than formal recording devices would have. That's always the challenge, isn't it? Balancing tradition with practical necessities. We went through something similar with our wedding ceremonies. Used to involve entire communities and last for weeks, but economic pressures, She trailed off, then looked up with genuine concern. I hope you don't lose those traditions entirely. There's something beautiful about rituals that connect you to natural cycles, that require community cooperation. Once they're gone, they're usually gone forever. The comment hit deeper than Zixtara expected. Elena had identified, in moments, one of the central cultural anxieties of modern Korthani society, the slow erosion of practices that had defined their species for millennia. It wasn't something they discussed openly with outsiders, yet this human had recognized it intuitively. We do worry about that, she found herself saying. Our philosophers debate whether we're losing essential parts of our identity to modern convenience. Maybe there's a middle path, Elena suggested. We've found that sometimes old traditions can be adapted rather than abandoned. Virtual reality, for instance. Some of our communities use it to maintain cultural practices that would be impossible in modern urban environments. Not the same as the original, but it preserves the knowledge and the meaning. Zixtara paused, considering this. Virtual reality was common enough technology, but she had never considered applying it to cultural preservation. The idea was both obvious and revolutionary. Why hadn't Korthani thinkers made that connection? The conversation continued to flow naturally. Elena was genuinely fascinated by their ability to photosynthesize, asking detailed questions about the biological processes and their integration with Korthani architecture. She laughed with delight at stories about solar festivals and listened with solemn attention to descriptions of the dark season challenges. That's incredible, Elena said when Zixtara explained their relationship with their dual sons. So you basically never have to worry about food scarcity during normal seasons? Well, not exactly. Zixtara found herself explaining in detail. We still require certain trace minerals that must be obtained through traditional feeding. And during the dark season, when both suns are eclipsed by our system's gas giant, we must store energy in advance or supplement with conventional nutrition. The dark season famines have shaped our entire social structure for thousands of years. Elena's expression grew more thoughtful. How long do the eclipses last? Approximately 4 standard months every 7 years. It's our species' greatest challenge. Entire generations can be lost if preparation is inadequate. Have you ever considered orbital mirrors? Elena asked, her tone so casual she might have been discussing the weather. You could redirect sunlight during eclipse periods, maybe even increase photosynthetic efficiency during normal seasons. The suggestion hung in the recycled air like a revelation. Orbital mirrors, large-scale stellar engineering, the kind of megaproject that would fundamentally transform Korthani civilization, eliminate the cyclical famines that had shaped their culture for millennia, revolutionize their entire relationship with their environment. It was exactly the sort of technological leap that other species had received from humanity, simple, elegant, obvious in retrospect, and completely transformative. That would be. Zixtara struggled for words, her mind racing through the implications. No more dark season famines. No more careful resource rationing. No more population controls. Their entire social structure was built around scarcity management. What would happen to Korthani society if scarcity simply disappeared? Just a thought, Elena said with a casual shrug, as if she hadn't just handed her the solution to her species' oldest and most persistent problem. Though I suppose you'd need to work out the orbital mechanics first, and the initial resource investment would be pretty steep. Maybe start small. Test the concept on one of your smaller colonies first, see how it performs before committing to system-wide implementation. This was it. This was the test. Elena had just casually offered her the key to transforming Korthani civilization, delivered it like discussing weekend plans. Now came the crucial moment. How would Zixtara respond? Would she leap at the opportunity, grateful for the quick fix to ancient problems? Would she demand technical specifications immediately? Would she begin calculating the political advantages such technology might provide? The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just about orbital mechanics or stellar engineering. This was about the fundamental question that lay at the heart of human contact protocols. Was her species ready for the kind of change that could reshape everything they were? Zixtara felt the full weight of the moment crash down upon her like a collapsing star. The casual conversation, the friendly questions, the shared laughter. All of it had been building to this precise instant. This wasn't about orbital mechanics or stellar engineering or even the elimination of dark season famines. This was about whether her people possessed the wisdom to handle the transformative power of human innovation without destroying the very essence of what made them Corthani. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Elena waited patiently, her expression open and curious, giving no indication that she had just offered to fundamentally reshape an entire civilization. Her brown eyes held no pressure, no urgency. Just the same genuine interest she had shown when asking about mating dances and solar festivals. Zixthara's mind raced through the historical precedents. The Brackery had been the first species to make contact with humanity after their emergence onto the galactic stage. Their homeworld had been dying, their population facing extinction from a plague that their medical science couldn't cure. The humans had offered a solution, genetic therapy that could not only cure the plague but enhance Brackery longevity and cognitive function. The Brackery had accepted immediately. Within 50 years, their society had collapsed under the weight of its own rapid advancement. Enhanced individuals lived for centuries while unenhanced ones died of old age in decades, creating a rigid caste system that tore their civilization apart. Their technology had leaped forward faster than their social institutions could adapt. Wars erupted between the enhanced and unenhanced, between those who embraced human influence and those who rejected it. Their homeworld was now a scarred wasteland, their people scattered across refugee colonies throughout the Outer Rim, living monuments to the dangers of advancement without wisdom. "Dr. Rodriguez," she said slowly, choosing each word with the care of someone defusing an explosive device. Such a project would require tremendous resources, unprecedented international cooperation, decades of careful planning. The social implications alone. Elena's smile was knowing, but not condescending. Revolutionary changes usually do. What specific aspects concern you most? The question was deceptively simple, but Zixthara recognized its true depth. Elena wasn't asking about technical challenges or resource allocation. She was probing for something far more fundamental, whether the Corthani had thought beyond the immediate benefits to consider the long-term consequences. "Our population is carefully balanced against our resources during dark seasons," Zixthara explained, feeling as though she were revealing state secrets rather than basic demographic information. "Our entire social structure, our laws, our cultural values, everything is built around managing scarcity. If we suddenly eliminated that scarcity, overpopulation, resource conflicts, social upheaval," Elena finished gently. "Yeah, it's a classic problem. Earth went through something similar during our agricultural revolution, then again during industrialization, and again during our genetic enhancement period. Growing pains of advancement." The casual way she mentioned Earth's own struggles was somehow reassuring. Humanity hadn't emerged fully formed with perfect solutions. They had faced the same challenges, made the same mistakes, learned through bitter experience. "How did you manage it?" Zixthara asked, genuinely curious now. Elena's laugh held darker notes than her previous amusement. "Badly, mostly. We had wars, famines, plagues, environmental collapse. The agricultural revolution led to population explosions that outpaced our ability to organize society. Industrialization created wealth disparities that nearly destroyed us. Genetic enhancement almost split us into separate species." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "It took us centuries to figure out sustainable growth, to develop social systems that could handle abundance instead of just scarcity. We learned that technology without wisdom is just a faster way to destroy yourself." The words hung in the air between them like a fundamental law of physics. Zixthara felt something shift in her understanding, not just of the test but of humanity itself. They weren't offering easy solutions because they had never found any themselves. Every advancement had come with a cost. Every leap forward had required painful adaptation. "What would you recommend?" she asked quietly, abandoning any pretense that this was still a casual cultural exchange. Elena leaned forward, her relaxed demeanor replaced by something more focused and intense. "Start with your social systems. Can your government handle abundance? Do you have mechanisms for distributing resources fairly when scarcity is no longer a driving factor? What happens to your cultural values, your work ethic, your sense of purpose when the fundamental challenge that shaped your civilization simply disappears? These weren't technical questions, they were philosophical ones. The kind that required deep introspection about what it truly meant to be Korthani. What would they become if they were no longer defined by their struggle against the dark seasons? Most species rush to grab the shiny technology, Elena continued, her voice taking on the weight of hard-earned experience. They see the immediate benefits, no more hunger, no more resource wars, no more environmental limitations. But they don't think about what happens next. The Zephyrians tripled their lifespan overnight and spent the next century dealing with massive social stratification. The Helleni eliminated their need for sleep and discovered that their entire culture was built around dream-sharing rituals. Zixthara's throat sacs fluttered with anxiety. What happened to them? The ones who survive human contact are the ones who think through the consequences first. They ask not, can we do this? But should we do this? They understand that every solution creates new problems, and they prepare for those problems before implementing the solutions. The test was becoming clearer now. It wasn't about intelligence or technological readiness. It was about wisdom, the ability to look beyond immediate benefits to long-term consequences, to understand that growth without preparation was just another form of destruction. This is the test, isn't it? Zixthara said suddenly. Not whether I'm intelligent enough to understand your technology, but whether I'm wise enough to question it. Elena's grin was brilliant. Took you longer than most. The Gornathi figured it out in the first 10 minutes, but they're natural philosophers. The Villani took 3 hours. They kept trying to impress me with their art until they realized I was more interested in why they made it than how. And species that fail? They don't fail exactly. They just aren't ready for the kind of relationship that changes everything. Elena's expression grew thoughtful. We learned the hard way that good intentions aren't enough. When we first made contact with the Zephyrians, we shared our medical technology freely. Overnight, their life expectancy tripled. Their population exploded, their resources became strained, and within a generation they were at war with 3 neighboring systems. Zixthara felt her scales ripple with unease. What happened to them? They survived eventually, found their balance. But it took decades of conflict and millions of casualties. We realized we had a responsibility to consider the long-term consequences of our enthusiasm. So now you test everyone. We evaluate everyone, Elena corrected. Some species, like the Gornathi, are natural philosophers who think through implications before acting. Others, like the Kethmori, are warriors who adapt quickly to new challenges. Each relationship is different, but they all start with the same question. Can this species handle change without destroying what makes them valuable? Zixthara considered this. And what makes the Korthani valuable? Your patience, your careful deliberation, the way you balance individual needs against collective resources during dark seasons. Those aren't weaknesses to be overcome. They're strengths to be preserved even as you grow. So, Elena said, settling back into her chair with the casual grace that had initially seemed so deceptive. Knowing what you know now, are you still interested in orbital mirrors? The question carried the weight of her entire civilization. Zixthara understood now why the Galactic Council was so secretive about human contact protocols, why species emerged from these meetings fundamentally changed regardless of the outcome. It wasn't about protecting aliens from human technology. It was about protecting them from the seductive temptation to advance too quickly, to leap into the future without considering whether they were ready to land safely. The orbital mirrors weren't really the question. The question was whether the Korthani Republic was prepared to transform itself, to abandon millennia of careful resource management and scarcity-based social structures in favor of something entirely new. Whether they had the wisdom to handle abundance, the institutional flexibility to adapt their government and culture, the philosophical framework to maintain their identity while everything around them changed. I think, she said slowly, feeling the weight of every word, that we need to have some very long conversations with our philosophers first, and our sociologists, and probably our historians. Elena nodded approvingly. making a note on her paper pad. What kind of time frame are we talking about? Perhaps 5 years? To study the implications thoroughly, build consensus among our 17 colony worlds, develop comprehensive frameworks for managing post-scarcity society. Zixthara paused, considering the magnitude of what she was proposing. We would need to examine every aspect of our civilization, our legal systems, our economic models, our cultural traditions, our population policies. Everything would need to be reconsidered. That's refreshingly realistic. Most species want results in months, not years. Elena's smile held genuine respect. The Draknari demanded immediate implementation. The Keltharians wanted technical specifications before they'd even finished our first conversation. You're the first ambassador who's asked for time to think. Zixthara felt a flutter of pride, quickly followed by apprehension. And after 5 years of study? If you still think your people are ready, we'll talk about pilot programs. Maybe start with a small mirror array around one of your uninhabited systems. Test the technology in your specific stellar environment. Work out any unforeseen complications. No commitment to full implementation. No pressure to expand beyond what you're comfortable managing. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on her. No pressure. No demands for immediate decisions or binding commitments. Elena was offering her people the gift of time, the opportunity to grow into readiness rather than being forced into advancement. There's no rush, Elena continued. The technology will still be here in 5 years or 50 years or 500 years. The universe will wait for you to be ready. Zixthara felt something she hadn't expected. Profound relief. The test wasn't about proving her worthiness to receive human gifts immediately. It was about proving her wisdom to reject them until the right time, to prioritize her people's long-term well-being over short-term advancement. Dr. Rodriguez, Elena, may I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you enjoy this? Holding back solutions to problems you could solve easily? Watching species struggle with challenges you could eliminate? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her expression growing thoughtful. It's one of the hardest things we do, she said finally. We see suffering we could prevent, problems we could solve, conflicts we could resolve. Every day we choose restraint over action, patience over intervention. She looked out at the stars again. But we learned that forcing progress on people who aren't ready for it isn't kindness, it's cruelty. Better to let civilizations grow at their own pace than to break them with good intentions. As their meeting drew to a close, Zixthara realized she had received something far more valuable than orbital mirror technology or any other advancement humanity might offer. She had been given the greatest gift one civilization could offer another: time. Time to prepare, time to plan, time to ensure her people could handle the transformative power of human innovation without losing their essential nature. There's one more thing, Elena said as they stood to part, her casual demeanor returning but somehow deeper now, enriched by the weight of their conversation. The test isn't really over. Every species we work with faces new challenges as they advance, new choices that test their wisdom. The Gornathi are currently grappling with the philosophical implications of consciousness transfer technology. What does individual identity mean when you can back up and restore minds? The Kethmori are learning to channel their warrior culture toward exploration and protection rather than conquest, discovering that the greatest battles are sometimes the ones you choose not to fight. She gathered her simple belongings, the paper book, the small notepad, the container of colorful skittles, with the same unhurried grace she had shown throughout their encounter. Growth never stops, and neither do the hard choices. Each new capability brings new responsibilities, new questions about who you want to be as a people. But you'll be there to help? Zixthara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We'll be there to ask the right questions, Elena corrected gently. The answers have to come from you. That's the whole point. We can't give you wisdom, only the opportunity to develop it yourselves. We can share our mistakes so you don't have to repeat them all. But every species has to find their own path through the challenges of advancement. Zixthara extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell she had studied during her preparation. Elena clasped it warmly, her grip conveying more genuine trust and respect than any formal diplomatic protocol could have achieved. The simple human custom somehow felt more meaningful than the elaborate ritual exchanges her own people practiced. "Thank you," the ambassador said, meaning it more deeply than she had ever meant any diplomatic pleasantry. "For the test, for the patience, for understanding that some gifts require wisdom to receive properly." "Thank you for being worth the wait," Elena replied, and Zixthara understood that this too was part of the human approach. Seeing potential in others, believing in their capacity for growth, offering not just technology but faith in their ability to use it wisely. As Zixthara walked back down that sterile white corridor, her steps felt lighter despite the enormous responsibility now resting on her shoulders. She understood why humanity was the most restricted species in known space. It wasn't because they were dangerous in any conventional sense. It was because they were generous beyond measure, and generosity without wisdom could destroy as surely as any weapon. The real test hadn't been whether she could understand human technology or even appreciate human philosophy. It had been whether she could understand human restraint and learn to exercise it herself. Whether she could accept the hardest gift of all. The responsibility to choose wisely, to grow slowly, to preserve what was valuable about her people even as they transformed. Behind her, Elena returned to her book, a battered copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and continued reading about the relationship between technology and values. She made a brief note in the margin, "Korthani, approved for Phase 1 cultural exchange. Recommend 5-year preparation period before tech transfer discussions. Strong philosophical foundation, excellent wisdom potential." In the vast network of space, another species had passed the secret test. Not by proving they could handle human gifts immediately, but by proving they were wise enough to wait for them.